Trek Profiles Podcast, Episode 20, recorded January 2019. This is the Trek Profiles Podcast, where each episode we sit down with a Star Trek fan, we learn their story, and we attempt to understand why Star Trek matters to them, to you, and to each of us. I'm John, your intrepid host of this whole enterprise, and I welcome you to this, the Trek Profiles Podcast, Episode 20. If you want to contact us, you can reach us at feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter at TrekProfiles. If you want to leave us a voicemail, you may do that at our automated voicemail line at 609-512-LLAP. That's 609-512-5527. Warning! As we record this, we have just started Season 2 of Star Trek Discovery, so all previous Trek content up to and including that point is fair game and may be discussed during this episode. You have been warned, human. As always, my trusty sidekick and co-host is the super fastidious, always factual yet never friendly M5 Multitronic Unit. Greet our listeners, M5.
M5 Multitronic Unit, all systems standing by.
M5, show me the news and messages.
Messages and announcements on the main screen.
This show is a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network. We've got some big news as I record this. The network has added several new tiers on Patreon. Now, if you've been a Patreon supporter in the past, everything is the same, but we've added more levels with additional fun stuff, such as the ability to vote on show topics, to get guaranteed guest spots, exclusive swag, and there's even an option to get your very own guest spot on this very podcast. So check it all out at www.patreon.com/the-Tricorder-Transmissions. And if Patreon support is not the right thing for you, that is okay. There are other ways to support the show as well. We would appreciate your ratings and reviews in iTunes, YouTube, or whatever platform you are using to listen to our shows. We'd appreciate it so very much. All right, it is time for the review of the Kobayashi Maru questions from Episode 18 with Ali Martinez, otherwise known as the 23-year-old Trekkie. Question 1. In your next life, you will be reborn as a Star Trek alien. You can choose between Andorian or Vulcan. Ali made the logical choice and selected Vulcan, and so did all of you, by 62 to 38%. Question 2. Time for lunch. Will it be plomeek soup a la Neelix or omelets a la Riker? Ali selected the soup. Now, personally, I was partial to the soup as well. Even if it's poorly cooked, vegetarian soup probably won't kill you, but a Riker omelet just might. However, on Twitter, all of you selected the omelet by 67 to 33%. Question 3. Worst possible Star Trek punishment. A month in the agonizer, like in the Mirror Universe, or 20 years of implanted prison memories, like from the Argrathi. Ali selected the insidious prison memories, and so did all of you by 62 to 38%. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's question 4. Who is the worst Badmiral? Haftel, who tried to take Lal away from Data, or Pressman, who illegally tested a Starfleet cloaking device? Ali picked Pressman. Now, without a doubt, this question caused more discussion than any other in my show's history. It got the most number of votes, shares, comments, and all of that. This one particular tweet seemed quite representative of the kind of discussion. Quote, Pressman is worse, but Hafter is the bigger... And that was from the wonderful Lee Sargent, who tweets at Lee Sargent. Another commenter said, quote, Haftel redeemed himself when he comes out of the lab and starts with, she won't survive much longer. That's when the waterworks start for me. Pressman showed zero remorse. Great story and performance, but a totally unredeemable character. Unquote. That was from at John Fuchsius Online on the Twitter. There were many more comments and thoughts on this, and the poll ran neck and neck until the very final moments when Haftel was declared the worst Badmiral by 51 to 49% with 302 votes. And finally, question 5. Who's chasing you? Is it the Tal Shiar or the Obsidian Order? Ali went full Cardassian for this one and picked Garrick's old crew, and the Datapa Council and all of you on Twitter fully agreed with this pick by 60 to 40%. As always, you can follow me on Twitter, and after each show, I posit the questions to all of you, and we have a fun time hashing out those questions. So join me there if you want to talk to me about the Kobayashi Maru questions from this episode. All right, that's going to do it for messages and communiques. Let's move on. M5, let's run the intelligence profile for this week's guest, and let's start the show.
M5 will comply.
Her favorite character is all the Daxes. Her favorite alien that she loves to hate is Q. You can find her on Medium at Jenée, and you can find her on the Twitter at JenéeITC. She's Jenée Fowler from North America Earth in Sector 001. Welcome, Jenée, and thanks for being on the podcast.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Jenée, are you a Star Trek fan?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, fantastic. That is the price of admission to the Trek Profiles podcast, is being a Star Trek fan. What is your very first Star Trek memory? Do you have one?
It's kind of blurry because I think I started watching Star Trek along the lines of, the first time I started watching TV, and as an 80s baby, that was what I grew up with, the beloved television, and Mom loved reruns of the original Star Trek, so I got steeped in that, and then, the Next Generation was coming out as I was growing up, so it was kind of always around me, like a protective little bubble.
So as we sit here in 2019, have you seen all 700 and something hours of Star Trek, or only certain parts of it?
No, I haven't seen everything, but I think that I've seen probably more. I've seen almost everything. I haven't seen all of Voyager, and I'm caught up with the New Discovery. We can argue about how you feel about that. And I've seen all the original, all the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine. I'm sure I'm missing a lot of stuff here. The movies.
Enterprise.
Yeah. Okay. So Enterprise, I've seen like couple of seasons of, so I didn't see all of that. That's true.
Animated series?
So, no, but I've heard things. I should.
It's a trip. I mean,
yeah?
it's trippy. It's kind of crazy.
Totally worth it.
I think it's totally worth it. Some people will tell you it's not. It's too weird, but there's some pretty good episodes in there. And every time I look at it, I always think, man, I can't believe they got away with putting this on Saturday morning TV for kids. I mean, it was just, some of it was so trippy. It really was.
Ooh.
Okay, so which series do you most closely identify with, if any?
That would have to be the Next Generation. Like I said, it was coming out while I was growing up, and that was really, it was, those were my heroes. I looked up to that crew. We pretended to be that crew. We had those toys, that was my childhood right there.
And so when you were growing up, you were watching it with your family.
Yeah, my single mom raised us, myself and my two brothers, and Star Trek was one of those super safe things we could watch. Mom was pretty strict as far as anything violent or sexual or suggestive on TV, but Star Trek always got a pass. It was always completely okay with her, as long as we could play with the phasers, but we had to set them on stun. That was the rule. We couldn't pretend to kill anybody, but luckily, the characters in Star Trek, everybody is very ethical, very moral, depending on how you look at it, and they follow the Prime Directive, which you're not supposed to go around killing nobody. It says it. So, so it kind of worked out. Like it was a really, really safe environment for us, and it was a lot of fun. So we did spend a lot of time watching it together.
Fantastic. Did you have a particular character that you liked the best on Next Gen?
Oh, that's I think it would have been Tasha if they would have not killed her off. And that was her choice, I understand. But I think when I was younger, I thought that I had to identify more with female characters. But now as an adult, looking back, I think that I've always most strongly identified with Data.
And why was that?
Well, I think it's partially because of Data's sort of outsider status. He spends a lot of time looking at people and trying to figure out how to be like them, even though he is like, he's designed to be exactly them. He's supposed to be, but he's not. And I think that dichotomy of always feeling not quite adequate and not quite fitting in, but also knowing that you're quite capable if you're at the right application. Because sometimes Data is like, I'm not saying I'm smart like Data, but he is like super smart. He's like really, really cool in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah.
But I think I identified more with his outsider status than his like super intelligence.
I think a lot of people do. I think a lot of people felt the same way about Mr. Spock, that he was sort of different from the rest of the crew. They felt the same way about Data in a lot of ways. So I think that's a pretty common sort of thing. Are you still watching Star Trek today? You catching up on Discovery and seeing most of that?
Absolutely, absolutely. That is. Did you see the Discovery shorts?
I've seen them all. I do
Oh,
a Star Trek podcast. How could I
I
not
mean,
watch
I
all the
mean,
shows?
they just happened. I didn't know if you had subscriptions or whatnot. I didn't know if you had time. I know you have other things than just the Star Trek and the
Well,
podcast.
we
That
have
would
to
be a
make times for the things that
conversation.
really matter for us, Jenée. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, there. This I. In defense of Discovery, because a lot of people are like, "That's no Star Trek." It feels to me like there's a lot of the original spirit. It is a little bit like action, explosions.
hmm
But if you're gonna fault it for something, okay, the action's a little unrealistic. Like the rest of everything has been so realistic up to this point, you guys.
Well, I think part of what people have to come to terms with is that if you're going to make a TV show in 2018, 2019, you just have to have a little bit of special effects extravaganza rolled into the burrito. It's kind of just mandatory. But I think the balancing act, just like making a good burrito, is not to let the rice overpower the beans and not to let you get the whole thing has to be in harmony. You know what I'm saying? You can't have too much of one
Mhm.
thing. So I think that's for Discovery, I'm kind of half and half on it. But season 2, I've been really excited about. I've really liked it and felt much more at home in these last
Mhm.
couple episodes than I did in the first season.
Definitely, definitely. It felt like it was trying to land somewhere and get its kind of grounding. And maybe season 2 is the Riker's beard moment for this, because we have to give them all that chance.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you were to judge TNG, for instance, by the same standards that people are looking at Discovery, it's like TNG never would have made it out of the first season. I mean, it was a spectacular horror show for most of season 1, and I mean, you just go, "Oh my god, get out of this!"
It's quite bad. It's quite bad.
Yeah, I mean, some of them were so bad. I mean, what was that one, Code of Honor? And I just thought, oh my God, I remembered that I had to have watched this when it first came on the air. And I guess I just suppressed all memories of it because it was so freaking bad. So,
I mean, in my defense, I was a child, like literally a child.
no,
So
I was in high school. So I'm a bit older than
okay, you were
you.
still a child. Is our same defense.
But I know that because I was in high school at the time, and I know like I was a Star Trek fan since 6, and so I knew I was in high school watching those episodes every night when they went on, and I just must have suppressed that whole thing. So when you're watching Discovery, are you just watching it by yourself, or do you watch it with other people? You have a viewing party, or just consuming it on your own?
No, it's funny because speaking of the Riker's beard moment, I watched Discovery with my partner, who is now like a really big Trek fan. But when I met him, he'd never seen a single episode. He didn't know what the big deal was, and I tried to.
So you're recruiting for the fandom, I see.
Absolutely. I think more people should actually. I think I've mentioned this to you. I think you saw it in the original reason that we corresponded. But I also recruited my English professor. We can get to that later. But so my partner had never seen any episodes, and I wanted to get him into it. And I sat it down in front of the Next Generation, which was on Netflix, so it was really easy. And he basically ignored up until the Riker's beard moment. Like he was on his phone just kind of scrolling during the first couple of seasons, and then it started to get good. And he was like, "Oh!" And then by the end of it, he was just like gripped, and he was so sad when it was like the last episode, and we watched Deep Space Nine together, and I had actually never seen the entire I'd seen Deep Space Nine in pieces, but I'd never seen the entire canon like together before. So we watched all of that together, and we've been attempting to watch an episode or two of Voyager here and there, but it is so hard, and I want to so bad, but it is so hard. And I've heard that you basically the Riker's beard moment is when
9.
7 of 9, right? And from what I understand, which my friend told me about it but didn't kill it for me, was that there's some things that would really interest me about the entire story surrounding Voyager and 7 of 9 and the continuing interaction between.
Oh, good. Well, maybe we can talk about that a little bit later. I actually missed most of Voyager, and so I'm actually catching up right now. I'm in
Oh,
the middle of season 3, and I'm
is 7 of 9 there yet?
no, she doesn't come in until season 4. But I will say this:
Oh,
I really am enjoying it. So I much more so than I thought I would, because I just being a fan and being around a lot of other fans, people seem to hate on the show all the time. And I just think it's fantastic. There's one episode that really bothered me, which is this infamous episode called Tuvix. Have you ever seen that one?
maybe.
So here's the story in a nutshell: is that Voyager, there's the Captain Janeway, and she's got these two officers, or one officer and one like civilian passenger who's been like helping out on the ship. and Neelix and Tuvok. There's a transporter accident, and they get merged into a new being, a new person.
Oh,
And he's actually really cool. He's very different than the other two,
okay.
but he was created by this transporter accident. And the point of the show is, should they try to reverse this and get the two officers back, or would that be ethically incorrect because this is a new person? And it's, can you murder this person to save two people? Well, if that's true, then wouldn't you be able to just go in the street and just like murder people and harvest their organs to save more people? Like, wouldn't it, like if you're saying it, I can murder Tuvix because I can get two people back, well, then I should be able to go and like just randomly murder people and take their organs and save lots of people, right? I mean,
I,
so that's kind of the ethical dilemma in the episode, and that one kind of threw me for a loop because I completely seized up on it. I'm not going to spoil anything for you, but I'll just say
you're
that
not going to tell me whether or not they split them or they leave them conjoined.
well, that's the episode is,
Okay.
should they do it, right? And I felt like, without giving away what they choose to do, I felt like that they didn't give the appropriate weight to the ethical decision. Like, that's something that like you should be like crying into your bed sheets over for like weeks on end, right? That's not the kind of thing you're like, yep, I think, okay, I got an 11 o'clock meeting. Let's bang this out right quick in 15 minutes because I got some other people. Okay, what are we going to do? Bing, bing, bing. It was more like that. And I'm exaggerating a little, but only a little.
I mean, Data got a whole trial.
Yeah, I mean, Data had a whole trial, right? They didn't have any of that in this episode. I just felt like they didn't give the weight to the ethical decision that they should have.
Maybe it's because Voyager is like a ship on its own, and like basically the Prime Directive is out the window at this point. I mean, really. So maybe it's just they just do court like quick.
You know what, Jenée? I would be down with that, but then I can tell you how many episodes where they're like, no, it's because we're going to follow all the Starfleet rules that we're going to get out of this. And so some episodes are like, no, we have to do everything correctly. And then some other episodes are like, no, we ain't doing any of that. Okay, fine.
The Prime Directive is like, it's like the everybody, like, when people have babies on shows and babies only make baby noises when it's like appropriate for them to make baby noises, and then every time else they're quiet. And like, if the main character needs to do a thing, it's not like, oh, we have to find a sitter, or like, I need a nurse. It's just like, no, we can. Like, I had a baby like 10 minutes ago. It's good. Like,
Well,
the Prime Directive is like the convenient baby.
I think this comes up in every episode of Trek Profiles, but I like to call it the Prime Suggestion because they never seem to like it never seems like they have to follow it.
What are you gonna do?
All right. So anyway, I thoroughly recommend Voyager. Give it a shot. You may like it.
Try it.
Just stick with it. So you've watched the show. Are you a collector? Do you buy any Trek merch?
Well, when I was younger, collectively throughout my group of friends, we had an Enterprise, like the pretty large scale, like not huge, but like the biggish ones that you could build, and there was also a Klingon bird of prey, and we had the little shuttle. It was so cool. And then we had like several of the characters from Next Generation and a couple from Deep Space, and we would like play very intricate games with them. But as I got older, I didn't really, I couldn't really keep them. My friends still have some of them, and I saw like the whole set at a store recently, like a collector store. But I'm not, as much as it's really sentimental to me. I also feel like I don't really have the money in my life. Like, I've moved across the U.S. so many times. The last time I moved from Manhattan to Chicago, and it was what could fit in my car. Like, I had this little 2-door hatchback, and including my cat was in there, and like, who became later, I didn't at the time, was not dating this person, but my current partner, who's like over 6 feet tall, and then his like younger sister, and then like the rest was my stuff. So it's kind of like, it's not that I wouldn't collect if I were there, but it's like not really a convenient thing in my life, and it also makes me appreciate it, but I'm glad other people are keeping it in plastic, because if I had it, I just want to play with it. I would just like, let's be real. Plus, I want one of the communicators, because they made them back when I was a kid, but they're like giant. They're like the size of a freaking apple, and I want like a small one that connects to my phone, and I can like have an incoming call, and when I like my phone is ringing, and I can hit it, and it'll be like, and I can like have my conversation, and that's what I want. Like, I want a communicator like that. We can do that. We have the watches people have are tiny. Like, we can have communicators. I don't know why we don't have this, guys. It's 2019. I went off on a tangent.
No,
Yeah.
it's fine. I think you're right. I think we could have that stuff. In fact, I'm sure someone's going to tweet at me and tell me that this stuff exists.
For $1 million.
Yeah,
I don't have.
yeah.
I
That's
don't have
you
yet.
got to put the pinky
I'm
in the
going to
corner of
school
your
right
mouth
now.
when you say it.
No, I shouldn't even made that joke. Again, it's 2019. I need to remind myself of that. Like no one. It's like $1 million isn't even that much. In 2019, it's laughable.
I get you.
Meta.
So
Doesn't matter.
I think we're in the same boat when it comes to collecting because I am never able to keep stuff in the box. I am one of those people. I'm just like, this looks too freaking cool for school, and I just want to like open it up and just check it out and play with it. So
I
I
have to make
totally get it.
Kira index keys.
I know, and I'm a grown man, and I'm like, I want to play with that. So it's totally get it. But that's one of the reasons I do the show, right? Is to indulge my love of Trek and to talk to people that love it too. Have you ever been to a Star Trek convention?
Again, this comes into this like whole price thing because I remember when I was a kid they had them and that was a no go because I wasn't actually allowed to hang out with people that were not in the cult I was in, so that was a no. And I think they were pretty like cheap or free back then because it was just like serious weirdos like us, and I mean that with all due respect.
I heard the love. I heard the love.
But modern day ones I've seen them around and like they're pretty expensive and I'm a student and I budget how many socks I buy. probably not gonna I'm probably not gonna spend money to come hang out with other people. Like it would be cool to have the fellowship, but on the real, like I'm not putting out money for that. And also, I don't know. Maybe if I had the money, I might to support because it's cool. It's cool. It's just I don't. I'm too cheap.
Hey, I don't blame you. It's not for everybody.
Do you go to them? Do you show up? I bet you're like a celebrity. You show up there and people are like, "Oh, podcast
Me?
and the thing." Yeah.
No, no,
No.
no, no, no. That
No?
that is hilarious. In fact, I'm like so far down the list of people who matter in Star Trek fandom that like I am to be mocked and laughed at uproariously.
What are we doing here?
So it's very cute that you think so, but that's totally not the case. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some other little bits, and then we'll get into maybe talking about some episodes. Have you ever worn a Star Trek uniform of any kind, or a T-shirt, or a Star Trek piece of clothing?
I don't think I've ever owned anything like on the real. I would. I get most of my clothing either someone will purchase it for me because they'll be like, "Oh, Jenée would wear this," and and then it shows up, and I'm like, "I will wear that." Or I find it at thrift stores usually. Like, I mean, not like underclothing, but I don't have any Star Trek underclothing. But I suppose this would be the time to share if I did. But I think I'm totally for it. I've seen like if I were to get a uniform, and I've seen a couple of them, I don't want a cheap one. I want it to look really legit. And if I did, it would really my home uniform is not the Next Generation how they changed up the uniforms because Riker got fat.
Riker got fat.
No, seriously, you know what I'm talking about. The Next Generation when they changed the uniforms from being like a onesie.
Yeah, they went from a onesie to the Mandarin
with
collar.
the sweater thing. No, the Mandarin collar came with it. Like most people, not everybody had like a two-piece like sweater thing. If you looked at it, it had a sweater thing, and because it had like a second piece because Riker got fat and they couldn't put him in the onesie anymore because his gut wouldn't hide. And you can also see the freaking corset he's wearing. I'm not trying to pick on the man, but like he could have had a personal trainer. He was doing very well. Like at a certain point, it's not healthy, and he was a famous person. Like, come on, Riker, like you could do better. Oh, they had to change up the whole uniform for him. That's why I'm mad about this. It's body positivity, love yourself, Riker, you're beautiful just the way you are. But the uniform was so good, and then they had to change it.
So I have to divert here a minute just to point out the fact that in my research to getting ready for this show, I found your 6 minutes of stand-up on YouTube.
Oh no!
And
that was.
Oh yeah, and I'm totally going to link to that on.
Oh no, I don't know if that was even the. Listen, okay, I've only done stand up a couple of times, and that time I was trying to fill space, and I said a bunch of times, and it makes me sound like I don't know how to public speak, which I do. I could go without
No,
like
Jenée, it's not a negative thing. I'm saying I'm recommending to you that you need to do a Star Trek comedy routine. I think it would be gold. That's all I'm saying. Like that little bit you did right there on Riker, that is gold. You should. You know how you can get out of. You know how you can get out of paying for a convention ticket? You should go on like the entertainment circuit and do like a Star Trek stand-up bit. I think you'd kill. I think you'd totally kill.
You don't even know. I have like one of the tabs of the many tabs I have open is like comedy, and I always trying to push myself. I just need to go to some open mics. Like I've got invites to go places. I just it's scary, man. I have a little social anxiety.
That's all right. That's you know what? That is so common among Star Trek fans, and it's
Oh
common among
yeah.
the populace. Now, me, I don't have social anxiety. My problem is that I generally hate people. So that's I don't know what that's categorized as, but I generally hate everyone. So
Uh, People who like to put a tough twist on their social anxiety. It's not me, it's you guys. I'm not nervous.
all right,
Psychoanalyzed.
all right. So what I've done. Well, wait, before we move on to this, I want to talk about how I found you and how you got on the show. People take a very strange route sometimes getting on a Trek Profiles. There are some people who decide to email me, and they just start emailing me vociferously and frequently about why they want to tell their story. And some people I just run into and invite them on. Some people I see in a certain venue, and I'm like, this person's fantastic. I'm going to invite them on the show. Sometimes I'm missing a certain kind of thing, and I'm like, hey, I need like fans who are this way or that way, and I go out and I seek people. In your case, I found some of your writing online about Star Trek, and I invited you on. So I just want to start a little bit generally, and then we'll zero in on a couple things and maybe talk about some episodes. But what induced you to start writing on Medium and on HuffPo about Star Trek?
So I've been writing for a while, and I actually just I like Medium as an outlet because it's really beautiful. It's really easy to share, and I trust it. And it's been a good resource. A lot of people have actually been able to find me through there. It's been really good for networking. But specifically, I've been writing stories about or that link to the cult that I was raised in, and I've had this conversation over and over with my friend. I have a good friend that was also raised in the same cult. That's also a huge Star Trek fan, and he's out now as well. And we have a lot of conversations about just how Star Trek and how it impacted us and like what it did and how crazy it is that we were even allowed to watch it considering how we grew up. And so I think it was just like I'd had this conversation enough times, and I also had this essay that I'd written for my English final in my college English class last semester, the semester before, and my professor from that class wrote me a recommendation, and his recommendation talks about the essay and how it kind of like changed his whole approach and the way he thinks about things. He didn't even really give that much merit to science fiction before, and now he understands. And he's like very dystopian. He's worried about any technology I might work on because he thinks that we're going to have robot overlords, and
Oh, right.
very he's one of those. And he's right, we are going to have robot overlords, but why not make friends with them? And it's better to be someone working on them than someone working under them, but whatever. um Anyway, he's worried about our robot overlords. So he saw this essay, and it really changed his approach to things, and he's given the series a second chance now, and he's actually started watching it. And I just thought I should kind of share like the first part of the writing that you found me through was the more personal side of it, of how I grew up, and then the second half was actually just the essay without the MLA or APA formatting, and that's a little bit more universal because obviously in my English class I didn't go into as many of the personal details in my essay as I did. So it's sort of I think it just sort of had to come out.
Okay. Well, one of the things I always do is I have my co-host, the M5 Multitronic unit, go out and prepare a list of episodes that we might use to talk a little bit about Star Trek and your personal story with Star Trek. And one of the episodes that the M5 had selected for us was Covenant from Deep Space Nine. And I think it's obvious to those of us who know the episode that this is an episode that is very much about cults and about how faith, especially strong and unquestioned faith, makes people do things which are pretty questionable and pretty risky in many cases. So I think I want to start by asking you and interrogating a little bit on what you've made reference to this cult that you grew up in. So why don't you tell us what that was and help us understand why it was a cult and why you call it that?
So yeah, I think the second part of your question is probably the more interesting part. This is a cult that a lot of people have heard of, so I think I'd rather answer it in reverse order,
Sure.
because a lot of people see these people out and they're very familiar with them, but they think, oh, they're just these nice people in suits and they seem so well behaved, and there's nothing scary about them. They're a cult for a lot of reasons.
Who are we talking about,
I
Jenée?
guess Jehovah's Witnesses, but I
Okay.
kind of wanted to say that. Yeah. Jehovah's Witnesses, they are a worldwide organization, and they're a cult for a lot of reasons. I think one of the big reasons right now that's in the media is that if someone abuses a child, it is reported to the elders, and it must be, as part of their doctrine, reported to the elders. And the elders know about it, and they keep a record, and they send that record to what is known as the society, which is the organization behind the whole thing. And they have headquarters all across the world, and they have one in New York. And my point is, there's this huge file kept, but they never report any of it to the police because they have a rule, and you can go on their website and check this out. It's called the two witness rule. And in order for somebody to be guilty of doing something, two or more witnesses, which they have a definition of what that means, have to have seen it. So if a child says this person molested me, then it doesn't really, they don't get in trouble for it because it's just one child. It's just one person saying it. So in Australia, I think it was, there was over 1,000 cases that they hadn't reported that they got found out about because court stuff happened. And it's quite bad, but it's part of their doctrine. And the other part is that they will separate families, and they tell parents, not only are parents supposed to be physically abusive toward children, they encourage parents to use the rod and not spoil the child. They used to hang a paddle at the Kingdom Hall I went to in between the two bathrooms. Like, your parents would drag you to the back and beat your ass.
So a Kingdom Hall is a meeting place.
Oh, they don't call it church. And that's the other thing. They have their own language. They have very specific words for things, and they don't participate in holidays. They don't participate in, sports or the Pledge of Allegiance or military service or giving blood or getting blood. In fact, they have publications that they put out regularly, and they featured children who have been basically martyred, under the age of 18, people who have refused blood transfusions and died because of it, knowing that would save their life. They publish these children as the faithful. But my own mom won't talk to me because of this cult. She's on the inside of it. I'm on the outside of it because I don't agree with them. And I was I was a victim of molesting and grooming before the age of 18 by a member of the cult, and I was punished for that, which is just,
My goodness.
yeah, it's really messed up. But my mom is still in. She won't speak to me, and they had told her to treat me like I'm dead because that's part of the doctrine.
So when you reported it to your mom,
Mhm.
did she ask if you had two witnesses? Is that
Well, in
how I
my
understand
case,
how it works?
in my case, it was different. It wasn't that I didn't have two witnesses. I was punished for it. They agreed that it happened, but I was punished for what I was complicit in because I was 14 when a 51-year-old man met me, and then he groomed me in that he planned. I'm sure you know the definition of grooming, when you find a minor child and you control basically their mind to get them to do things, and then I was complicit in everything basically, but it happened before I was 18, and so I was punished for that because I was a sinner. So I was molested, and then I was punished because I did admit that happened. So there were two witnesses. He admitted it, and I admitted it because we got found out. He was married, and he ended up dying actually during my senior year of high school. It was really really messed up, but they still have it all on record. And the truth is, the three elders that had known me since I was an infant interviewed me specifically about all of the sexual acts that he performed on or with me. And I had to sit for hours explaining these acts to these men. And then after that, after sessions of this, they decided that I was guilty and bad and punishable. So I was a victim of molestation, and then I was punished for being a victim of that. I was cut off from my family, and no one was allowed to speak to me.
Including your mother?
That's what this fellowship is. Yeah, if I lived outside the house, so once I moved out of the house, my mom wouldn't even speak to me. And now she won't speak to me at all because I've come out and said I don't agree with this stuff publicly, which makes me apostate. And that means she can never speak to me again, and that there is no redemption, and that basically it's forever in their minds. That's Jehovah's Witnesses doctrine.
My goodness.
It's a cult.
I don't even know what to say
It's a
about
cult.
that.
It's a cult. Sorry, that got really heavy. Sorry.
No, it's okay. And I've had people on that have told some very profound stories. And what's interesting to me is that, of course, we're talking about these stories through the lens of Star Trek. And in a lot of cases we see in these stories that we're told through the science fiction matinee sort of show that we come across these aliens where they have this monoculture,
Mhm.
all believe so strongly in A or B or C.
Mhm.
And, 9 times out of 10, whenever you come across that kind of group in a Star Trek episode, it's because there's one guy who either challenges it or never believed in the first place. And the whole story's about, what happens. And that's what happened in Covenant is, Ducat doesn't believe it. But other people did. And they ended up doing things that were not in their own self-interest. And it sounds like in this case, your mom certainly cutting you out of her life. I mean, that's, the most painful thing I can imagine for someone to do is to cut their child out of their life. I mean, my
Yeah,
goodness.
and that's I think that's why the Borg like really appeals because like on Reddit there's a community of XJWs that is actually growing every day. We're getting huge. There's so many people that are leaving and because the Jehovah's Witnesses have a logo now. They have this little thing that's like a big JW and then underneath it has a .org because it's the organization and it's .org whatever. But so in the XJW community we refer to them as the Borg because it's so uncanny how like because when people are in it, they're so in it that they'll give up their own children, they will let terrible things happen and not go to the police. They will internalize all of this guilt and this shame and they're isolated and the other thing is like if you were to speak to my mom and you were to bring up any point about Jehovah's Witnesses, there would be like an automatic response that she had already learned at the Kingdom Hall to say to you, like just like the Borg, just like she basically like resistance is futile, like you will be assimilated. Like my mom will just try to preach to you, like it's so creepy, you know what I mean? And it's also like super similar, and being able to watch that, being able to see how destructive that is and how powerful that human nature and that spirit that we have is because all of Star Trek was humanity overcoming like these ridiculous obstacles in space. Like these things much bigger than us were us being able to overcome because we had worked together as a world federation and as an interplanetary federation, like the Federation of Planets. That could only be achieved after basically world peace. Everybody on this planet had to be fed and taken care of before we were off into the stars. That's so hopeful. And like Jehovah's Witnesses teach that like doom is tomorrow. Armageddon is on its way. Like and there's no point in investing anything in this world because it's wicked and it's going to be destroyed. And God's earth is the only like God's future is the only possibility. And there's a very, very small percentage of people, very small, that are going to survive. And it's very Borg like, and I love that Star Trek has that power. And you were talking about the episode of The Covenant where it was you were saying who didn't believe?
Well, Ducat was the leader, and he actually didn't believe it himself. And in fact, he was
Mm.
going to pull a sort of a quote unquote Jim Jones maneuver and be like, "I think our cult, we need to kill ourselves and take these pills." And meanwhile, he had the pill that didn't actually do anything, and he was going to give the real pills to everybody else. And it turned out that he was, phony baloney. And fortunately, Major Kira saw through it all. But the question that I want to ask you is I hear the story you're telling, and it's heartbreaking. Can you even enjoy an episode that has Borg in it? I mean, can you watch it and adjudicate it in your own head? Can you watch like I, Borg or Q Who,
I mean, it freaks me out.
or does it bring up too many painful memories for you?
When it comes on, like I definitely when I rewatched the Next Generation with my partner when the Borg showed up, I was like gripping onto him and like kind of cowering a little bit. It's not the easiest thing. It does definitely bring up some stuff, but at the same time, I'm about to turn 34 years old. I've
Happy
had some time
birthday.
to like oh, thank you. Thank you. I've had some time to live and process and I'm actually like I'm on a really good path and not to spoil it for anybody, it's been a while since it came out, like we got Captain Picard back. If you're strong enough,
There's a spoiler warning at the front of the episode, so don't worry about that. You can't spoil anything as far as Trek profiles.
if you're strong enough, like Picard, they were able to get him back. He's still a little. There was like a little residual, like there was some stuff,
Yep.
but it was just like you have to be like those people you really respect. There are people that have made their way out. Follow them. It's less like it's scary. I get that reaction, watching a scary movie, but it's also like, it's okay. I know the end. I know we win. I don't have to be afraid.
But one of the things that we learned in Next Gen from Picard is that even though he was extracted from the Borg Collective, we saw in First Contact that he could never really be rational when the Borg were involved, and he sort of basically he lost himself because the Borg were attacking, and he kind of made some decisions which were not necessarily the sort of rational Picard decisions we would have expected. I assume you probably still struggle with the same thing, or is that not the case?
I don't think that logic and emotion are entirely separate. And I think that that is actually a big overarching lesson that we learn from Spock and all of the Vulcan characters is that there is an immense power. In fact, there's so much emotion behind all of it. It's just being able to harness and control it and use it powerfully and in the right direction. And so, maybe I need to stay away from them. Maybe I can't be up close. It's kind of destructive if I'm there, but I think just like Jean-Luc is very applicable in other situations, he's still a really good captain in other ways, and I think that there's just other ways that I can apply myself. I don't think people have accused me of being angry, and I think, yeah, I'm still like, I think it's still a little too, it's a little too enraging because it's still happening, and so I can't fully disconnect my emotion from what they're doing. But I can definitely learn lessons about what I can do and how I can move forward. You know what I mean? So it's still, yes, it is still a weak spot for me, but it's something I can overcome.
It sounds like you have some very positive inclinations with where you're going with your life, even though you've had a pretty rough history.
I think that the rough history has actually made me a lot a lot better. I think it's kind of like, when you first got to know the crew, any crew, you're like not that interested in them. But after you go through this crazy journey with them, and sometimes they make bad decisions. Sometimes you hate their decisions, and especially with like Deep Space Nine characters and a lot of the more conflicted characters. But that is what grows them and what makes them rich and deep and powerful and interesting. And I don't think that I have negative emotions toward my path. I'm actually kind of glad. It sounds crazy to be like glad that I went through crazy stuff, but it's like I've traveled the galaxy and I know it's out there and most people have not at this point, and I'm just like, it's crazy. But I wouldn't take it back, I'm here. I got here because I went on this journey, and I wouldn't have encountered the wormholes I did. I wouldn't have been here now if I wouldn't have been there then. It wouldn't mess with the space-time continuum.
Well, I think it's quite wonderful that you have a sense of humor about it, and you seem like you're in a much better place than you were in the past, for sure.
Well, definitely. That's the whole point of even examining this, is to examine the gulf, the difference. Because I'm pursuing my dreams right now. A lot of them are very inspired by Star Trek.
I want to talk about that in a minute. I think I want to first talk about another episode with you, which is Who Watches the Watchers
Mm,
from TNG, which is when
mm.
this pre sort of space flight, pre technology, in many ways, civilization suddenly realizes that there's the spaceship in orbit, and one of the people goes up to the spaceship and sees what's going on and learns what's actually happening, that it's a great big wide world out there. And there's a whole nother side to the world and the universe than what they believe back on their planet. And she says, you're gods. And he's like, Picard,
He's like,
he's like, I am not a god. you know,
you used to live in a cave? Like,
I am not the god you are looking for, and I am not any kind of supreme being.
yeah.
And he basically convinces her through logic that she just needs to adapt to this new reality and help them out and retrieve the people that they need to retrieve and set things right. Do you find that you want to talk to other JWs about your experience, or do you just give them a wide berth? How do you feel like you want to engage with JWs now at all, or if at all?
Well, it's kind of a complicated question because active Jehovah's Witnesses right now, it's against their doctrine to have anything to do with me. In fact, I don't even think they can listen to this podcast. I think what I've said has been apostate material because I've said that I'm apostate. So I think actually if a Jehovah's Witness was listening, they'd probably already like they may have like just been like, oh, I can't, or at least they're having a conscience problem right now. They're like, I know I shouldn't actually be listening to this. So Jehovah's Witnesses are they're kind of trained to like block out anything. Like they're allowed to use the internet, but they're only allowed to go to the internet that the org has their website. Like I'm not even kidding. It's ridiculous. But to XJWs, I definitely communicate because, like I said, there's a huge number of us on Reddit, and I always look for them. I find them a lot on Medium. I find them anywhere I can, actually, and I have a lot of meaningful conversations because they have, similar stories. I had someone share with me recently on Reddit the fact that they were like, yeah, I basically had the same kind of childhood and the same experience with the Jehovah's Witnesses, and I went back to school when I was 34, and he's like, right now I'm pursuing my PhD, and just kind of told me how, like, don't give up, and even if you don't get into this program, you'll get into another one. You got this, kid. And it was really great. It was it was really encouraging. I get a lot of love from strangers that offer to be my adopted family.
That's nice.
for the ones that are shunning me. Yeah, it's actually it's really encouraging and uplifting, and there's a lot of love in this world, and I think that's kind of the biggest message I would give to anybody like questioning leaving the JWs. Anybody on the edge there is just to know that it's not true about the world being full of like wicked evil people. It's there's so many good people. There's it is a balance, but the things inherent in our nature that they've told you are all evil are also, there's charity, there's forgiveness, there's love, there's all these things that humans are just naturally inclined to do. Humans actually have natural responses to help each other, and that's part of who we are too. So like it's not all terrible. There's like a lot of good, so much good out there.
I think that's one of the positive messages of Star Trek as well, is that that the world is a great place, and we're better off when we realize we can help each other and when we can work together to do things. And sometimes we choose to forget that, and it makes it a negative experience for people when that happens. So my question for you though is, when you're in a public place and you see those folks out there handing out the literature, which is, I understand, is a very JW thing to do, is to be standing like in airports and in train stations, right, passing out literature. Do you feel do you give them a wide berth? Do you try to engage with those folks? How do you handle that?
It's a very modern JW thing to do. It used to be that they would go to people's doors, and they also started like calling people before I left. But I left like, it's been about 14 or so years. It may be longer. I would have to do some, no, that's about it. Almost 15. Whew. Anyway, so it's a modern JW thing to do, and it's so weird because they just sort of stand there listlessly. And we used to have these like rigorously prepared sermons that we would knock on people's doors, and it would match all of the new literature, like whatever it is. We'd have some like thing to say and like a scripture to read. Anyway, I started knocking on people's doors when I was like really little. Like I was reading at 3, and I was like reading scriptures to people and like guilting them into keeping their door open because there's this adorable child. And then Jesus said, anyway.
Oh my goodness.
So when I see them, I have like very mixed emotions. I have approached them before, and I've said like, hey, that they hide, the stuff about pedophiles and the stuff about the 2-witness rule, and they have like these, like I said, they have these like programmed responses. It's like if you encountered a Borg in the wild that's like kind of like plugged into a little Borg port,
A Borg port.
they're like, I don't know, they're like beep boop, and they're just chilling there. I don't know, like they're not, and I've been kind of like, I've seen them sort of near some of my schools, and I've talked to people at the school and been like, can we have them removed? And they're like, no, it's, they're in between us and a public train station. We really can't. I've said I don't feel comfortable with them. Like I'm a victim of them, of the church's 2 movement, if you will,
Sure.
and I don't feel safe around them at all. But I have actually considered doing my own form of cart witnessing, which is what it's called, and like getting a sign that just kind of briefly explains a little about what they've done, and just standing there with like some information on how to, like what to look up to know the truth about them. I have had a lot of people, I think kind of my writing is a little bit more effective because I've had a lot of people read that and be like, oh, okay, they're really dangerous. They're not safe. They're not friendly. I don't want to deal with these people. I'm not going to take their literature, and I am going to warn my friends. And that's kind of my mission, is just to get people to realize how dangerous they are.
So I will put up links to all of your Medium articles, your HuffPo, and all the other stuff
Yeah, I haven't
on the
posted
show
the
page.
Huffington Post in a minute, but I need to get more stuff over there.
Oh no, it was great. I was especially interested to read the story of your brother, who was trans and how they
Yes.
transitioned, and that reminded me of another Star Trek episode, of course, which is the Outcast. So everything sort of reminds me of Star Trek episodes. It's really weird, when you do this kind of show, how this happens.
Yeah,
But
I think my brother liked Dax too when he was younger. So, I'm trying to go to school for bioengineering, actually.
and what do you want to bioengineer? Do you want to make some Borgs or what?
Bioengineering, like, kind of encompasses a lot, but I think that there are solutions in technology that have not even remotely been attempted to been explored that, like, involve women's health. And that's kind of what I want to do is I want to find that intersection, because women's health is just like no one pays attention to it. There's no money in it, and I want to go into research, which is stupid. I won't make any money, but I think it sounds really cool and really interesting. So I that's what I'm like sort of trying to do. I'm trying to finish my undergraduate right now. I went to like the city college because, like I said, I didn't have a very good high school education, and I went to this very inexpensive city college here in Chicago, and it's actually been a really cool experience. It's there's a bunch of campuses, and they like this school has a food bank once a month
Hmm.
in one of its like main areas, and they do so much like if it's cold and they shut down the school because it's cold, they open it to the homeless population
That's
so that they'll have
wonderful.
a place to go, and it's like it's named after leaders that are important, like Harold Washington and Malcolm X. It's like it's a great system here in Chicago. So I just finished up there and I'm hoping to transfer to a 4-year institute. And that's why I'm trying to get a scholarship because well, I'm totally broke, but I have really really big ambitions that are not going to be very lucrative. So
Hey, you know what? Maybe someday you'll be remembered along with Newton, Einstein, and Surak.
that would be. I don't necessarily need to be remembered in that way. I think because I was thinking about it, and there's important issues, there's big issues, and if you're going to devote your life to something, if you're going to work as
Hmm.
hard as you can, which this is what I'm trying to do, I feel like it has to be something worth it.
Yeah.
Worth all that because that's my whole life. That's everything I'm going to do from now until I retire, which I'll probably be mad old when I do, and that's like most of my good years. Anyway, I thought I don't know what all I can work on, but I've always had like fascinations with things, and I like researching. And I kind of settled on this because you don't have to decide one part of science; you can do all the science, and it's also probably the area I thought I could make the biggest impact in. And I thought about like we're moving forward, we're changing like our energy consumption, and we're possibly going to other planets, and we're doing all these like we might colonize other planets, not just going to them, but like creating biospheres and like it's awesome. But how are we going to do that when 1 out of 10 of us is suffering like I am, and people are saying it's normal? And you know what I mean? Like I feel like it's one of those things that just needed to be solved to help us move forward.
I've said this on the show before, but I think one of the things that unites all Star Trek fans is a belief that humanity's best days are in front of us.
Yes, exactly. It's like it's me being hopeful, but I don't really know how to be like a little bit, so I kind of go full throttle on things.
I,
That's sort of my upbringing, but
hey, my
yeah,
friend, I think it's
exactly.
beautiful. I mean, how many
Thank you.
people? I think it's almost retrograde in a way to say that the best days are ahead. Because if you think about it, how many people do you and I know? And we've never talked outside of this podcast. And this is the first time we've ever spoken.
True.
I will bet that you know a lot of people who would be like, "That's it. The world's going to hell in a handbasket." Like right now, this is the end of everything. Right
Well, the
now.
people I know they don't believe in hell. They do believe in hand baskets, but they're not really in front.
But you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
people who
yeah,
say things
no,
like, it's
no.
never been as bad as it is right now.
The
And
end times, the end is ever closer. It's look at all these signs, how wicked the world is, and like if you actually look into the statistics, if you Google it, you'll realize that the world poverty rate has dropped like significantly. It was like
yeah,
38%, now it's like 15% or something. It's like the child mortality, infant mortality has dropped significantly worldwide. Like we have extended lifespans, we have shortened hunger. We're also like majorly screwing up our environment. Don't get me wrong, but we're also looking at it and going, okay, here are solutions. We can fix this. It's not too late. And if we work together, like the most ridiculous thing, and I think the biggest thing that I saw in Star Trek that I know is possible is we have the resources to feed everyone. And it's so sad that people starve. You know what I mean? Like everyone could have a home. Everyone could be taken care of. And if we all did that and we worked together, we used our collective power and intellect and ability, then how much more we could get accomplished if we weren't fighting each other in the street and fighting each other for resources and fighting just to live. Like it's been really scary. Like parts of your life that are scary make you do scary things. And like we don't have to have that. We can end all of that, you know? And I think that like that I know that's like super idealistic, but I think that's
No,
also
it's
like the
fine.
direction that we're moving in. That's like slowly the way that we're all and we can fix our problems. We humans have made a mess, yes, but we've also made some great and interesting and amazing inventions and we can make it better. We can fix it still. Like we'll like find some duct tape or something.
We'll get there eventually. I think that that's, unbounded optimism, I think, is a hallmark of all Star Trek fans,
Yeah,
And
I mean, why not?
no, I think that's true. And
We
that
need it.
that unbridled optimism is really at the core of all Star Trek. And I think it's something that's at the core of people who are forward looking and thinking about what the future will bring and how it's going to be a better place than it is today. And I really believe that. And I realize it's not the cool thing to do. I mean, we're supposed to be talking about how the world's going to hell and everything is terrible. And I don't mean hell in like the religious sense. I'm just talking in the colloquial sense. But I think that better times are ahead. I really believe that, and that's one of the reasons that I'm a Star Trek fan. And I know that that's not cool right now, but
But it's so necessary. It's so important. It's actually like I was talking about, how powerful fiction really is.
mhm.
And because these stories that we bring into our homes and that we sit down and we watch, like they become our history, our stories, like I tweeted my story at all the cast and crew of the Next Generation. I don't know if any I think all of them were just like, okay, thanks. But like, they were so much a part of my family and
Yeah.
my story and my identity. And I think that that's what fiction does and what these stories do for us. And it's important to have a part of your identity that is unbridled hopeful because obviously there's a part of me that's more realistic. Obviously, I've been through some things. I've talked about some of the things.
Yep.
I'm not delusional. Like it's been rough. I've been homeless. I haven't been carless when I was homeless, so I should say that. Like it wasn't that rough. Like I slept in a car. Like it sucked, but it wasn't that bad. Like it was winter, but I'm fine. I was fine. I was younger. I was fine.
Wow.
Like stuff. Like so I've been like some stuff has happened, but it doesn't. And I'm not going to say I've always had a super positive outlook. There's been some people that have really influenced me that way, and again, those have mostly been strangers, like people that have come into my life at random and have just shown me ridiculous amounts of kindness. And those people are just like out there. It's not like the J Dubs say.
I want to turn at this point, Jenée, and actually talk about the whole, because we've been talking about particular issues and particular things that related to certain episodes. And the reason I invited you to be on the show was because I'd read your piece about how Star Trek helped you escape the JWs in your terms. So why don't you tell me a little bit about what was it in Star Trek that made you question this religion that you had been brought into since birth and really raised in?
Well, I think a big portion of it had to do with their approach to civilizations unlike themselves and their respect for ways of living and even religious practices that didn't line up with their own. And then I think the underlying theme or the overarching theme really of how science enabled all of the things to be possible and how even if it was like kind of laughable when people believed in things that believe things were magic or god that were actually science, they would still be kind to those people and they would still afford those people respect, but it was obvious that science was basically the answer. And and I think that really held a stark contrast between what the Jehovah's Witnesses taught because as you know, and as mentioned in my article, they don't even believe in the theory of evolution, and it's silly to say believe in. It's, they don't even recognize or acknowledge the overwhelming body of evidence to indicate that, evolution by natural selection is the process by which not only did we arrive, but, we have common ancestors. They don't look at any of it. They don't look at carbon dating. Like, the things that I've learned in biology 1 and 2 and in chemistry, just in basic college courses, have shown me beyond a shadow of a doubt, like, that the science backs up these basic tenets and these basic principles and understanding of our biological world around us. And that's something that, like, Star Trek would have been like, yeah, exactly. Like, we use science to understand stuff. And I think that it sort of planted that seed of, like, well, science is really cool.
Which it
It was,
is. It is.
it is. And everybody on the show that was, the best people were super, and everybody was into science. Like, it was a scientific exploration. The journey and everything about it was, like, rooted in this curiosity, which again is the antithesis of what Jehovah's Witnesses believe in, because they believe in, like, staying in this shell. They consider anyone outside of it worldly, and worldly is bad, and you can't associate with worldly people. They're dangerous. And so it presented this, like, stark contrast that was actually very, very healthy, and sort of rooted me in this idea that, like, science is cool and exploration is cool and my curiosity isn't bad or evil. I think it was really super inspiring without being too much. Like, it also was just kind of fun because it was aliens and space and phasers and ships.
Oh no, and we love that stuff. But I'll let you in on a little secret. It's in my last job. I had to do a lot of hiring, and one of the things I always looked at when I hired people was people who were curious about the world, who had an intellectual curiosity. Because if they were curious, that meant they were interested, and if they were interested, they could be trained. If they weren't curious, they couldn't be trained in anything. And so we generally couldn't help those people, and they wouldn't be helpful to others in the workplace. And so it's one of the hallmarks. But I want to press you a little bit, not in the interest of trying to raise the temperature or be a jerk, but I want to try to get to the truth of a few things. So I'm going to offer you some provocations, and you can tell me to take a step back if it's uncomfortable for you. Science is awesome and fantastic. It helps us understand the physical world, but it does have its limits in that it doesn't necessarily tell us how can I live my best life? What is beauty? What is just? Should I be with this partner and have a good life, or should I hold back from that partner and send them on their way and go for another partner instead and maybe wait for a better situation? What is the best way to be the best version of myself? So sometimes science doesn't have answers for that, but those things are touched on in Star Trek in other ways. And I bring this up in a very topical way because in the most recent episode of Discovery, Michael Burnham said, "Science is my religion." And I thought, well, that science doesn't answer a lot of questions which are really important for living a good life. It's important and awesome, but it's not enough. What would you say to that?
It depends on, like, what kind of science are we talking about. And we know through science that our memories are fallible, and every time that we go and examine a memory, it's just like touching a negative, and we kind of, like, screw it up, and it's not it's not the same memory when we put it away, and we literally just, like, messed it up and changed it and got our own new feelings on it. Whereas we can record something, and we can be very scientific in our process of, like, recording data, and we can actually, like, what do you trust more, your memory or a camera? If you have an eyewitness or you have a camera with, like, sound recording and, like, a clear face shot, like, enhance, and it really works, right? Like, so I would say, like, I could argue a lot about, like, it containing truth, but there's also how much have you studied, like, maybe, like, quantum physics or, like, things that are a little, like, theoretical in nature.
So,
there,
okay, that's a good question.
there
So,
are some branches. There's a quote from a book that I'm trying to find that I would like to present, but please.
it's okay. I just want to let you know that one of the guests I had on another show was an astrophysicist, Dr. Ethan Siegel. He's a science blogger for Forbes. And one of the things we got into was talking about quantum physics. And my question was, is the universe deterministic? And we got into this whole thing about, are transporters killing machines? And, can you really like actually transport somebody? Is that actually possible? And one of the things that he talked about is that quantum mechanics tells us that the universe is essentially unknowable at a quantum level in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
The really, subatomic level that the universe is not deterministic.
Mhm.
And I just thought that was a very beautiful concept, right? So if
Yes.
the universe at a subatomic level is not deterministic, that opens up some very interesting possibilities for how people might interpret that data in the world.
Mhm.
So, for instance, there's all kinds of questions about, do humans have free will, for instance? And some people might say, well, where's the biological determination of that? Well, if the very substance, the very basis of everything that is matter is not deterministic, but yet we're deterministic beings living in a made of non deterministic material, that's pretty mind blowing. And you think, well, that opens the possibility for further exploration. Not saying there's an answer there, not saying I know what it is, but I think that it's certainly intriguing. And I think that's the kind of stuff that, when I think about the kinds of things that Star Trek wrestles with, it's the kind of stuff that I find really interesting and the kind of stuff that I really enjoy. But
So
please tell me your thoughts.
on the subject, there's a really good book by have you read Carlo Rovelli?
I don't know
Have
that
you
one.
heard of Carlo? So Carlo Rovelli is he does physics, I think. Is it quantum physics? I can't remember what kind of physics right now. I'm sorry, but look up Carlo Rovelli. You should put that in the link. And he did this book, my favorite of his books. He's done several, and he's very popular. Anyway, one of them is called The Order of Time, and in The Order of Time, he's talking about this person, one of Einstein's friends, Michael Besso, dying, and him writing a letter to the sister of this person that died, his friend. And in it, he says that Michael has left this strange world a little before me, but this is the important part. He says, this means nothing. People like us, who believe in physics, know that the distinction made between past, present, and future is nothing more than a persistent, stubborn illusion. And actually, the more you study, I think, and I don't know anything about it. I have no basis for understanding any of this. I have just barely finished my first calculus class. I am not into physics. I don't know what I'm talking about. But I find a lot of comfort in books on the subject, on studying it in my spare time, and I've just found just it's very comforting. It's not comforting in the sense that I think that there is some overarching power, but I do think that there might be some overarching order, and I think that there's humans find amazing comfort in patterns,
Roger
and
that.
I think that the universe is a pattern. We do. I mean, we love music because it's a predictable pattern. We literally, that's all we are. It's just a weird repeating, desperate to make more of ourselves genetic pattern, a very complicated set of layer of bacteria and etc. But I think that it's comforting, not in that necessarily there are like crazy spiritual possibilities, but that again there's some divine, beautiful order, not necessarily of an individual's making, but it would be predictable if you were able to scale out far enough, if that makes sense. And we may never be able to, but I think it's that quest to scale out, to understand more of it, that drives us and makes us better.
I think we're in complete agreement on this because I think that curiosity that you have about these topics is part of one of the lessons that we can get from Star Trek, which is that curiosity about the universe and questioning our beliefs and interrogating the world and thinking clearly about what's going on around us is part of being a well-rounded person and part of trying to live the fullest version of ourselves. And it actually brings up this weird nexus between science and philosophy, which I think is in a lot of Star Trek, especially in Picard centered TNG Star Trek, when you have both of these things overlapping. When I was in college, and I was very young when I went to college, I studied some philosophy and I did papers and read books and, I did my stuff and it was fine. And then when I was much older, I went back to some of the stuff that I had read when I was in college, the same books. Particularly, I'm thinking of Plato's Republic, the Waterfield translation. And when I read that as like a 35-year-old guy and a 40-year-old guy, I had very different reaction to it than I did when I was in college. And when I was reading about Socrates, the character Socrates, not the historical figure, as Plato describes him to us in that book, I was thinking about what does this actually mean for us? How should we live our lives? One of the shorthand scribbles that people always have of Socrates is, the unexamined life is not worth living. And I think that's a message that's in a lot of Star Trek, right? Is to interrogate yourself and to ask questions about why do you believe these things? What do you think is true? What are these deeper issues? And to really live deliberately and not just like ride the waves on a rowboat, without any oars in the water and getting carried about to and fro. And that's the secret to a good life. And it's a lesson that I learned from Plato's Republic. It's a lesson I learned from Star Trek, which to me is amazing that these two things that are in these entirely different spheres have so much in common because they're getting at something that I think is profoundly true, and it's something that touched me. But we all take our own lessons from it.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
sorry. I just went on a total diatribe there. I
No,
apologize.
I agree with you. I think you're right. There's so much philosophy in the next generation, especially, and I think they touch a lot on like religion and religious bias. Like I think they're a little more direct on it on DS9, but I agree with you, and I think that philosophy is really important. I'm definitely a fanboy, and I'm sure I'm putting this person on a pedestal, but I think that Gene Roddenberry and the idea behind Star Trek and the original purpose and the original vision for the franchise is very philosophical. And I think we've talked about some of the things I touched on in the essay that I wrote, which is at the bottom of the article I wrote about the different people involved in the projects and the reason that they stayed involved, and the first African American astronaut, female astronaut, saying that she'd been inspired by Michelle Nichols. Like it was really quite a big deal. Like the first
Mae Jameson.
interracial on screen, huh?
Mae Jameson, I think, is the
Yes.
astronaut. Yeah.
I'm terrible with names. I should know these people's names better. I know some.
Well, I just know my listeners, and they're gonna tweet at me if I don't say it.
Yeah.
So they'll
I
be
know it's the
cross with
name.
me
Say
if
the
I
name.
if I
The
don't bring my
listeners.
Trek knowledge to the game.
Well, and these are important, just historical people anyway. And
Oh, totally.
the I'm sure your listeners are aware of that story posted by the Oatmeal about the reason that Gene Roddenberry went on to do what he did.
Oh, the Pan Am story.
Yeah, the Pan Am story. I'm sure it's been tons of other places. I love the way the Oatmeal illustrated it. I know that he just found the story and illustrated it. I'm not saying like giving him credit for it. Just
Yeah, and those people who don't know what the Oatmeal is, he's a basically an internet comic guy, not like a comedian, but he draws comics, and they're quite hilarious. And he did one about Star Trek, and that's I think what you're referring to. Am I right?
that is correct. That is what the Oatmeal is. He's a very talented individual. I really enjoy how he illustrates that story. It's emotional for me when I read it. I always tear up. I think it's just absolutely gorgeous. And I think that it speaks to how powerful media is and how powerful these screens are.
Well, I think though you're bringing up something which I think is a lesson also in a lot of Star Trek, which is that looking for allies is an incredibly positive thing. And so many of the alien species that we see in Star Trek, they want to do their own thing and be their own way and just sort of survive on their own. And they only realize through many mistakes and hard times that we're better together, and working with the people around you is a better strategy. And I
Yeah,
think
absolutely.
bringing those lessons into your life is a great thing, as you said.
Yeah, and that like that being able to like reach out and because they trust people. They trust so many people. Like there's so many things that happen and there's times that yeah, they get screwed over, they get captured by aliens, but usually they like use reason to get out of it or they figure out and try to help somebody. Like I don't know, it's a very different approach to what again how I was raised and this whole like approach of like fearing everyone and distrusting everyone. But yeah, it's a great lesson to take with you because the more allies that you make in life, I don't know how it is in real life. I don't think I've lived real life yet. Like
Sure
I
you
said,
have.
I'm in
I think you've
school,
lived a
so
realer life than many other people.
well, I mean parts of it, but I don't think I've I don't think I think the term is adulting, but I don't really like the term. It sounds kind of like
And it sounds a little
cringy.
amateur hour, doesn't it?
It's kind of cringy, but I don't think there are any like established utilities in my name right now.
It's okay.
I don't have my own Netflix. I'm still using someone else's login.
All right,
So
we won't talk about that. We shan't bring that up.
we're not
right,
really
'cause
grown up until we do that.
The Netflix overlords might be listening. So, Jenée, I have to tell you that I've enjoyed talking to you, but the M5, my co-host, is signaling me that it is now time for the Kobayashi Maru.
Oh no.
The Kobayashi Maru is a challenging and difficult test, cunningly prepared by the M5. Should you not only survive the test, but pass it as well, the M5 will award you an honorary Star Trek title. Are you ready, Jenée Fowler?
I believe so.
All right. M5, load the Kobayashi Maru simulation and prepare to record Jenée's responses.
Simulation loaded and ready.
Question 1. Who's the snazzier dresser, Neelix or Quark?
Quark, definitely.
Which Riker makes better omelets, William or Thomas?
William.
Tea Earl Grey hot or Ractagino?
Ooh, Earl Grey hot.
Which is the worst affliction, the Teplin Blight from Deep Space Nine or the Phage from Voyager?
The Phage.
Damjot with the Nausicaans or Sunkatse with the Norcadians?
Sunkatse with the Norcadians.
Outstanding. Simulation complete, M5. Please compute the results and tell us if our guest has passed the Kobayashi Maru.
Analyzing results.
Jenée, I am pleased to tell you that the M5 has calculated that you have passed the Kobayashi Maru simulation. Congratulations, my friend. You did it.
Wow. Happiest day of my life. I can't believe this. I studied so hard. All the hours I put in, they were worth it.
And now, the M5, who has analyzed your answers, will award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of our podcast. M5, what title shall we award our guest?
Jenée is awarded the title of Writer-in-Residence at the Tellerant Academy of Debate and Rhetoric.
So congratulations. There you go.
I don't get to be in science?
Well, you can write about science. You're the writer in residence. You can write about science. You can write about anything you want.
Well, I'm in debate as well, apparently, so I will argue this.
All right. Sounds good to me. Jenée, please tell people how they can get in touch with you if they want to continue the conversation.
Well, you can find my writing on Medium, and I always try to respond to responses. If you just type in my name, I think the internet will find me, like my first and last name. And if not, the links will be in your show. So that's one way. You can tweet at me. I sometimes check my Twitter. I would say like every couple times a week. I'm terrible. I don't know. Don't try to get in touch with me. Just leave me alone.
Fair enough. Jenée,
No, not really. Please get in touch. I was kidding.
Oh, okay. Well, that's all right. Jenée, thank you so much for being part of Trek Profiles.
It was an honor. Thank you for having me.
Here ends this installment of the Trek Profiles podcast. And before we offer a Trek quote to close this episode, I'd like to remind you that you may send us your friendly suggestions, hateful missives, or your pioneering intersectional cyber Star Trek /fic to feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter at Trek Profiles. Anything you send us may be used in the show, or it might be sent right back to the first chap. This week, I leave you with a quote from Kess, who in the episode Life Signs said, quote, "Romance is not a malfunction," close quote. Thanks for listening, and live long and prosper.